Okay, so the first is mutual, as I said, M-U-T-U. Alright, mutual attentiveness is first, and as I said, there's a sense in which we are mutually attentive. In a nonverbal sense, right? The example that I gave was the example of the relationship between a parent and the child. It's important to recognize, however, that the idea of mutual attentiveness isn't always necessarily a positive thing. There's a sense in which we can talk about mutual attentiveness and the relationship between parties is hostile, is combative. So let's look at 1A, top of page 13. Mutual attentiveness may not unfold positively. For example, this is a quote from the article, The Nature of Rapport and Its Nonverbal Correlates. The example that the authors use is, quote, when teenage boys confront one another in verbal combat. Right? So here I am, teenage boy, full of testosterone, ready to take over the planet. Here he is, teenage boy, full of testosterone, ready to take over the planet. And we are mutually attentive, right? We are mutually attentive to the needs of each other, but it's not an idea. The idea is that our attentiveness, when you think of traditionally the idea of being attentive, you think of an individual who is in a relationship with some outside party and is attending to the needs, the desires, the wants of the other person, right? There is a sense in which when we traditionally think of attentiveness, we think of service, right? You're attending to the needs. You're catering to the desires, the wants, the needs of the other. If the desire of the other, however, is the escalation of the conflict, and if my desire, my need, is to escalate the conflict, then there is a sense in which you can have mutual attentiveness in relationship to an escalated conflict. That's a mouthful. It's a lot to say conceptually. It's a lot to get your mind around. But there is a sense in which, since we're saying attentiveness is this sense of catering, the sense of offering, the sense of attending to the needs, desires, wants of the other person, if it's the case the other person is looking to escalate the conflict, and it's the case that I'm looking to escalate the conflict, then we can have mutual attentiveness that results in escalated conflict, right? So, I mean, we're sort of deep into the lecture. I would hope that made sense. All right, so what's going to end up happening is that this conflict is and will, oops, this conflict will and can be escalated, right? And this is problematic. Now, with respect to the research design and the relationship between the researcher and the participant, remember, this is an ethical discourse, right? This is an ethical discourse. I have an ethical obligation. You, researcher, have an ethical obligation, one, to make sure that the nature of the conversation, the ambient feel, the vibe in the room isn't such that the participant is or perceives to be interrogated. We're not interrogators. That's not what we do. And it's so simple. It's a fraction of a second that your research evaluation turns into an interrogation. And there's huge repercussions for that. You want to make sure that that doesn't happen. Second, we have to recognize a mutual attentiveness. You have to take into account that if it is the case, this is just like the poorest researcher. I can't really think of a case within a research setting where mutual attentiveness would result in escalated conflict. Let me think of something super cliche. Yeah, this research wouldn't be warranted, but I'll just think of something. No, I think I did mention something like this before. I think earlier, a few hours back, I created some scenario on the fly where someone outside of the family kills a member of the family. This happened to me in my family. Kills a member of the family, and then the family has the opportunity to confront the murderer in jail, like for real. And you always see this on TV. Like MSN has the prison shows or whatever, and you know, there'll be the scene where the guy murdered somebody for a car, and the family member has the opportunity to confront the murderer. I can imagine a scene where the family member who survived is now in a professional standing, where the family member is now a professor or has, you know, expert level research training. If I were to confront that that prisoner, like, granted, we recognize that prisoners are part of a protected, vulnerable population. I talked about that a couple hours back, but I was able to get access to this prisoner. There is a sense in which, theoretically, I don't think this would ever really happen, but I'm trying to give you an example. There is a sense in which, because of my personal relationship, outside of my professional researcher participant relationship with the person that I'm engaging in this interview process with, I could theoretically have my personal hatred, if you will, bias my intent, and really want to harm psychologically, cognitively, the other person. And if I have good enough training, I could do it. I'm not going to lecture on that. I'm not encouraging anybody to do that. I shouldn't have probably even said that. But as you know, my whole lecture series is a vibe, so I'm not also going to edit that out. But you get the idea, right? So I'm like, but you had this, and you had this, and then the guards are probably saying, I thought you were going to conduct interview. Oh, this is part of my interview. Yes, you know, here's my credentials. But you said that, and why would you do that, and da-da-da. And now he's going to recognize that he is on the conceptual attack. I am not physically attacking him, I'm conceptually attacking him. And if you guys think for a second that playing mind games isn't as dangerous as wielding a knife or a blade, you're not playing the type of mind games that maybe other people are. You can, you know, there is mental abuse. The psychologists have written about this ad nauseum. There's physical abuse, there's mental abuse. And as violent as physical abuse can be, an expertly trained, an expertly experienced researcher could immediately create innuendos, suggestions, use of euphemisms to get the person to feel belittled, humiliated, not as smart, not as whatever, and create a sense of anxiety in the person, in the actual participant. He's going to try and defend himself from that, and he's going to now attack you, not physically, intellectually. So that there's a literal battle going on, right? And there's a recognition that you're trying to do damage to me, I'm trying to do damage to you, and now it's on. Now we're going to play the game. Now let's go, right? The idea is, what happens? The nature of the conflict escalates, right? Excuse me, sorry. The nature of the conflict escalates, right? The participant is thinking to himself, listen, this researcher he's got malicious intent. But they don't know this. Now I'm talking about a real sort of less, that example was a bit out there, right? A more realistic example. And I'm glad this lecture series is almost over because I'm about to completely lose my voice. I talk so much. Excuse me. The participant, if the participant thinks, listen, I'm trying to give this dude or this chick a realization that, look, I don't really appreciate your questions. Like, what does that mean? Like, you can tell, like this. Bewilderment. Also associated with, it's stupid to actually have to make the face, right? You know what would be awesome? Like, still screen the face, right? And save it as a pic, because it's a ridiculous face, right? But it's sort of like, and I'm such a good player along, I'll play along, right? So the idea is like, imagine I wasn't talking, and I was like, this guy, like, why are you asking that? Right? Right? Or someone's talking to you and they're like, right? You can get a sense. They're telling you like, hey, I don't like that question. I don't want to talk about that right now. It's not something I really want to think about. Right? They're telling you without telling you. If you're not receptive to these nonverbal cues, the person's going to feel, oh, you're just using me as a means to an end. Granted, participant might not know about means and ends. But that's basically what they'll be thinking. Like,